All right, Mass Lives, Chris Cotillo getting some holiday coverage going here right before we maybe break. Who knows? I don't know at this point because we had a Sunday bonanza and really the last few days have been crazy. But Chris, thanks for joining us and let's get right to biz. Walker Buehler, the latest to join the Boston Red Sox rotation. Do you like this move and do you like this rotation now?
Yeah, I do. I think that they got their number one in Crochet. That kind of means that there's less pressure, I think, on Walker Bueller to come in and be the number one. You saw Tanner Houck do that for a large portion of last year. You saw Crochet become, one of the better pitchers in baseball last year. So to me, it's kind of Bueller, not necessarily a bonus because I think he'll have an important role in this rotation, but a guy who has been there, done that. If you look at the rest of the group, not a lot of postseason experience, not a lot of that veteran leadership. Giolito's obviously a guy who's been around, but only a couple of postseason starts. I think they're going to rely on Bueller for, hopefully, if they can get to October to be a horse at that point. And I think it's a good fit for him, just in a place where he can come in, be a veteran leader, still be in a big market, knows how to win, and hopefully for him, reestablish his value. 21 million, no one's going to sneeze at, but this is about, hitting the market next year, maybe getting a mega deal. We saw what happened, not great coming out of Tommy John surgery last year and then pretty good to finish in the postseason. So I think it makes sense, on a lot of levels for the Red Sox. And now, as you said, it's a very deep group. They don't have to rely on Houck and Bayo and Crawford to be, one, two, and three. Those guys can be, maybe three, four, and five, and Giolito's coming back and some other guys. So it's a lot better of a group than it was, I think, this time last year. It's a lot deeper of a group than it was at the end of the year, too.
Do you think there's more coming? Wherever that is in terms of spending,
Yeah.
because if you add up the actual spending they've done this offseason, it's not crazy. And I know they were talking to Juan Soto. So if we're supposed to believe that they were going to fork up 600 plus million dollars or 700 plus million dollars for Juan Soto, then are we to believe that the Red Sox would still potentially go after either an outfielder like a Teoscar Hernandez, an infielder like Alex Bregman, or maybe even another starter or big name reliever like a Tanner Scott to help this ball club? Because, I mean, I know Bueller's 20 plus mil, Crochet costs nothing. So I think there's still work to do for them and payroll to spend away.
Yeah, well, there's no full throttle promise, so they don't have that to meet, this time around. Been there, done that, but they did say, they were going to be convicted and try to go, more aggressive. And I think we've seen that, Crochet, um, Bueller, Patrick Sandoval on a 2-year deal, Aroldis Chapman, Justin Wilson, everything on the pitching side. They said Sam Kennedy told the Globe earlier this year that they expected to go and were willing to go over that, first CBT threshold. They haven't done that in a few years. I think that's still in play. They have 24, 25 million, left to play under that. I think they'd be willing to go over. It's not a hard cap. They're definitely going to have a higher payroll than they did a year ago. To me, Scott, I've been saying this since like October 15th. Teoscar Hernandez is a perfect fit in every way. He balances out the lineup. He'd be great at Fenway. He's been incredible at Fenway throughout his career. He's always wanted to play at Fenway, wanted to play for the Red Sox. And if he doesn't go to the Dodgers, I would guess that they're going to try to get aggressive on that just because he fits so well. I do think Alex Bregman's still in play. Obviously, some moving parts. Do you put him at second? Do you move Rafael Devers, which they don't seem crazy about? So I'd say in that order, Hernandez 1, Bregman 2 as the possibilities. I think that is the big need. This offense was okay last year, but Tyler O'Neill led them in homers. He's not walking through that door again. And I think another relief arm could help. Maybe see how the market shakes out. They have Chapman, they have Wilson, as I said, locked in from the left side. I know that handedness, doesn't determine everything nowadays, but to me, that means somebody like Hoffman or Estevez or Kirby Yates might be a better fit just to give you a high octane righty with instead of Scott, and Scott's going to cost more than all of them. In terms of starting rotation, it's tough to imagine they keep adding just because they do have those 6, 7 guys you can trust, plus 3 guys in AAA that should be in the mix, and Criswell, Fitz, and Priester. So to me, if I'm them, Teoscar Hernandez is plan one, plan 1A, plan 1B. So far, they haven't, doesn't seem like they've been the most aggressive team on him. I'm not sure why. But him fitting into that outfield mix, getting a lot of play at DH when you can't count on Yoshida, to me, he's the cleanest fit, and it's always been that case.
Yeah,
Sometimes when
Chris,
we're
I was.
looking at
Oh,
off,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Cam.
I'm sorry, my bad, Scott. I wanted to piggyback off of that because you make the comment that they're not as sold as some people may say on moving Rafael Devers. So that gets me to wonder, what is all the Tristan Casas talk about? What will they be trying to get to move him? And then, you also mentioned Hernandez in the outfield. Well, I actually like the young outfield they have. Where does that actually fit for you? Because I actually just don't see Teo fitting right there. Like,
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, they haven't moved Willie Abreu, which I think a lot of people were thinking they would. Rafael is a guy that is a really good center fielder
mm-hmm,
defensively. You're going to want him out there. Obviously, Duran became one of the best players in baseball last year. And Roman Anthony's the number one prospect in baseball, and you expect him to be up pretty, soon into this season. So to me, Teo getting at bats at DH makes a lot of
mm-hmm.
sense. The problem for the Red Sox, of course, is that they have Masataka Yoshida. He's under contract for 3 more years. He has very little trade value, but it's just he's another guy who is left-handed, did not hit lefties at all last year, and a guy that I think, they'd be better off without him on the roster at this point. It's tough to swallow that money in the trade or swallow that, deal in a DFA, which would have been, crazy to say, even midway through last season. But you just look at it, and I think O'Neill would have fit the roster a lot better last year with Yoshida not on the team, just in terms of being able to get him off his feet, DHing him, and I think that's what they're going to try to do. It's too bad Teoscar Hernandez can't play second base. That would obviously be a place where he could fit. On the Casas situation, I've always been against trading him just because I don't think they've seen the best from Tristan Casas yet. I think at his best, he can be an elite player, an elite run producer, and a guy that you can build a lineup around, which they don't even have to, right? Because they have Devers and they have that guy already. But they'd be trading him at a point where his value is a little lower after missing 4 months. I think they were shopping him in pitching trades as they were Abreu. I've never thought it was particularly likely he's going to move, and I don't think he will now.
So, Chris, how do you stack this team up in the AL East right now with what the Yankees obviously brought a strong year and that led them to a World Series appearance? I know the Red Sox are sick of losing, but are they improving enough in your mind to feel confident about them being a serious playoff contender, if not division contender, coming into next season? Because I also don't want to discount what the Orioles bring to the table, even though they're not doing a ton yet this offseason. There's still a lot of offseason to go. And I would even expect the Rays to be better just based on how many pitchers are coming back for them.
Yeah, and the Rays are always good no matter what, no matter who they have on the roster. Toronto's got, still that core. Vladdy's last year potentially under control. They could be dangerous even if they did flop last year. I mean, the division's always going to be good. You're always going to have teams, doing a lot. I think the Red Sox, if you look at it from a talent perspective, they're more talented than they were a year ago, just with Crochet, just with Buehler in the mix. Even if they haven't really changed the offense around much, I still think there's probably a gap with the Yankees. I mean, Max Fried headlining that rotation. Some of the guys they've gotten, Devin Williams, obviously, Bellinger, Goldschmidt over the weekend. Juan Soto's a lot to replace, but they have gotten some big names there. So, anything can happen once the games start, getting underway. And we've seen, wild card contention be something the Red Sox have flirted with the last couple of years. With so many teams making the playoffs, their goal is to get in. Their goal is to compete for the division. But they have to see, does Roman Anthony become a star in year one? Does Christian Campbell become a star this early? They obviously traded Kyle Teal, but what can they get out of Marcelo Meyer potentially late? Can Trevor Story rebound and have a good year? Can Duran, stay at the level he was last year? There are some question marks, and I think that's why they're probably not done. They're probably a couple big moves or one big move and maybe a middling one away from, having their finalized roster. But I definitely think, we joke about full throttle and we've talked about it on the show before, but like they've done a pretty good job identifying their needs this winter, going after them. Did they get Soto? No. Did they get Fried? No. But they probably get the best player in the trade market. And now they got Buehler, only for 1 year, but a bounce back candidate. Chapman should help the bullpen. And again, they're one bat away, I think, from me looking at it and saying, this was a pretty aggressive offseason. They are a lot better. And they do have the young core. This is a team that's built on the homegrown guys, from the rotation guys of Bayo, Houck, and Crawford, from Casas at first and Devers at third, and, Anthony and Campbell and Meyer. I always want to loop Teal in there because we've been saying those names together for about 3 years, but he's gone. They're relying on those guys to come up, help, the core that they already have in place. And if you watched them all last year, despite finishing 81 and 81 and falling apart down the stretch, on an individual basis, it didn't feel like they were that far off. There was a lot of guys who took steps forward. And I think they expect that to be kind of the baseline of real contention next year.
Let's finish with this because you've mentioned the young guys a few times. Are we discounting the impact that they can make in 2025? Like, what do you foreshadow for some of the youngsters, like say Roman Anthony, and what he can bring to the table, and also making sure that there is space for some of those players if they are ready based on the upside? Again, looking at the Orioles, because I think there's some comps sometimes with Baltimore and with Boston rising through again in terms of their farm system. Sometimes I think Baltimore's the way that they've developed their prospects now in the big leagues has been difficult at times because it's hard to bring them up and then find playing time for a contender. So how do you think they're going to thread the needle there?
Yeah, I think when you look at Christian Campbell, that second base job is for the taking. That's partly why I don't understand the Alex Bregman pursuit that much, just because you're adding another guy. You already have Story under control. Obviously, you have Devers and Casas in the infield. That is why that's a little confusing to me. It is a big ask to turn over a position to a rookie who was drafted, 2 years ago and just had a crazy helium year in 2024. With Anthony, it's a crowded outfield mix. We've touched on that. I think in a perfect world, Rafael is a super utility guy, and you roll with, maybe Abreu, Anthony, and Duran as your starting outfield. Very left-handed heavy, yes, but that's just kind of who they have. I do think Anthony and Campbell should be up in the first half. They got to AAA. They both performed really well. I would have said Teal would have been in that boat too if they didn't trade him. Meyer, I think at this point, is a little bit behind just because he's had injuries in the last 2 years prematurely and he didn't reach AAA at the end of last year. But the idea that they have the guys they have in the major leagues, the additions they have, and they still have, three top 25, top 30 prospects, real blue chippers who haven't debuted left, I think is what really excites the fan base. And, it's tough to ever expect, MVP caliber performances from guys in their first year. But, Campbell burst onto the scene last year with one of the great offensive seasons we've seen in the minors in a while. Anthony's a guy who is prospect pedigree through the roof and has checked every box since he's been drafted. So I think the expectations are high for those guys, but at the same time, they are insulated in some of those spots, right? Where if Anthony struggles and needs to go down, you do have Abreu and Rafaela and Duran and Russ Snyder and some of these other guys on the roster. Or if Campbell struggles, you have some other options. So I think they're trying to make sure that the pressure's not all on those guys when they come up, but also recognizing they think they're going to be a huge part, if not the featured part of the core going forward.
Yeah, they've done a great job at developing some of those guys. Obviously, yes, one of them turns into a trade and a huge arm, and one of my favorite moves of the offseason in Garrett Crochet because of the value you're getting and how cheap he is and how he could be a one for them. But yeah, it's a good move from Boston here. They're getting some gamers. Crochet's a gamer. Buehler is certainly a gamer, one of the best in the postseason in the last several years. Chris, thank you so much for the time, dude. Appreciate you hopping on right before the holiday. Red Sox keeping you busy. Everyone give Chris a follow at Chris Cotillo on Twitter. There you can find his podcast and also, of course, all of his articles. Podcast called Fenway Rundown. Chris, thanks again, man. Good to see you.
Thanks, guys. You too.